Funny how a moment can feel small until it decides to look straight at you. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy enough to make everything else fade out, like the world finally stepped back and stopped interrupting. You didn't earn an announcement. You didn't get a warning. This isn't about being chosen because you're special in the way people like to brag about. It's special because its private silence is deceptive. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, it doesn't announce itself in a way that makes you sit up straight immediately. It seeps into corners you've ignored. It creeps between the cracks of your daily noise, and it waits. People think they need chaos, urgency, the blaring signal to pay attention. They're wrong. The quiet holds more power than the loudest warning because it doesn't give you an excuse to look away. It forces recognition, and recognition is heavy. We spend our lives running from silence, filling it with chatter, notifications, explanations, and rehearsed dreams. Silence exposes the mechanics of our habits, the truth of our intentions. When it arrives, it strips everything else away. You can't hide behind pretense. You can't spin a story to make yourself look good. In that space, you are exactly what you've allowed yourself to be. No mask, no applause, no excuse. Silence is when the smallest detail becomes enormous. A look, a thought, a feeling you thought you could ignore suddenly feels like a tidal wave. That's why it's uncomfortable. People equate discomfort with danger, so they try to flee. They talk, scroll, move, anything to escape the quiet that knows them better than anyone else ever has. But running from it only delays confrontation with the truth that's already arrived. Power lies in observing the silence instead of fleeing it, in letting the pause between thoughts and actions grow just long enough to understand what's there. Most people never do this. They fear what they might discover. Fear convinces them that movement equals progress, that busyness equals value. The truth is, movement can be meaningless. Busyness can be a trap. And silence is where the real work begins. When you stop avoiding, you notice the patterns you've been repeating. Excuses, justifications, small acts of avoidance that once seemed harmless now stand out in stark relief. Silence doesn't forgive. It doesn't sugarcoat. It lets you see how often you've talked to cover fear, smiled to hide doubt, pretended you were aligned while running in circles. That exposure is uncomfortable but essential. Silence also sharpens perception. When the noise disappears, you hear what you've been ignoring. Your instincts speak louder, your intuition is clearer, and the questions you've been avoiding gain weight. What are you protecting? Who are you impressing? What are you willing to sacrifice to continue pretending everything is fine? Silence asks these questions without demanding answers immediately. But it waits until you notice. There's a strange intimacy in silence. It forces you to confront yourself in ways the external world never could. Other people react to your face, your words, your performance. Silence reacts to your being. It doesn't lie, it doesn't interpret. It only reflects. And reflection is brutal if you've been avoiding the truth for too long. That's why the quiet feels heavy. Almost like it has gravity of its own. Most people underestimate the lessons in silence because they confuse movement with progress. They believe action is enough to prove growth. Silence reveals that growth is internal first. Actions are secondary, reflections of what's already solid or fractured inside. In the quiet, you measure yourself not by applause or acknowledgement, but by alignment with the values you claim to hold. Silence also tests patience. It forces you to wait, to process, to feel the weight of your choices and inaction without distraction. It's a pressure cooker that doesn't explode but compresses reality so tightly that avoidance becomes impossible. The uncomfortable part isn't that you're exposed, it's that you can't postpone facing what's true any longer. When you embrace silence, it becomes a tool instead of a threat. It lets you think, feel, and plan without the noise that usually steals attention. It amplifies your awareness of priorities, intentions, and blind spots. You notice what's real, what's performative, what's urgent, and what's trivial. That clarity is both liberating and terrifying, depending on how much truth you've been ignoring. People fear silence because it's honest. It doesn't lie, it doesn't apologize, and it doesn't allow evasion. It strips away charm, justification, and distraction. What's left is you, your thoughts, your feelings, your choices, laid bare without permission. Facing that is not comfortable, and that's why most people avoid it until there's no other option. The moment you accept silence, you start listening differently. You notice patterns in others, in situations, and most importantly, in yourself. You hear the subtleties you've been too busy to notice. The moments when you compromise, the times you choose convenience over courage, the instant reactions that reveal more about your character than any conversation ever could. Silence doesn't shout, but it communicates. It asks you whether you've been honest with yourself, whether you've been brave, deliberate, intentional. It doesn't punish, it just waits. And in that waiting, it gives you a chance to confront reality without excuses, to measure your alignment with your own truth, to prepare for action that matters instead of noise that distracts. Attention isn't given, it's demanded, and the moment you realize it, it changes everything. People think they earn attention with noise, with performance, with flashes of brilliance they hope others notice. That's not true. Real attention arrives quietly, in the spaces where pretension is stripped away, in the moments where there's nothing left to hide behind. It's uncomfortable because it doesn't flatter, it observes. Most people misunderstand attention. They treat it like applause, like validation, like something to chase. They post, perform, narrate, hoping someone sees them. Real attention doesn't react to performance, it reacts to presence. It notices what you are, not what you want to appear to be. That distinction is subtle but devastating when you first recognize it. Attention shows up in the small moments. The silence after a question, the hesitation in a conversation, the unspoken expectation when someone looks at you and waits. It doesn't arrive with banners or music. It arrives in quiet pressure, and pressure doesn't negotiate. It watches, and it tests whether you're aligned with yourself or still performing for the comfort of others. People fear attention because it exposes patterns they've been hiding. It reflects habits, intentions, priorities. It makes excuses useless because it doesn't care about your story. It only cares about your consistency, your integrity, your ability to act when no one is forcing your hand. That's why real attention is heavy. It carries weight you've been avoiding. Attention also forces choice. When it lands, you can't be everywhere at once. You can't satisfy every expectation, silence every critic, or protect every ego. You have to decide what matters, what you'll defend, and what you will let go. That focus feels isolating at first, but it's necessary. Without it, attention becomes scattered and meaningless, and scattered attention is invisible. Most people run from this kind of attention because it's not flattering. It doesn't admire, it observes. It highlights where you're aligned and where you're not. It reflects the truth about what you prioritize, how you handle responsibility, and whether you're willing to be deliberate when no one is applauding. That reflection feels brutal because it's unyielding. Attention amplifies responsibility. When you're being observed, really observed, it forces you to reconcile intention with action. The small compromises you tolerated in private suddenly feel visible. The habits you excused in comfort now seem like choices. Attention doesn't punish, but it doesn't forgive either. It simply shows the reality of your behavior against the potential you claim to have. The paradox is that attention is not earned through trying harder. It arrives when effort is consistent, but more importantly, when it is honest. You can't fake alignment forever. Noise can mask gaps temporarily, but attention finds the truth. It doesn't care about stories, excuses, or charm. It reacts to reality, and reality doesn't negotiate. People often confuse attention with influence, but they're not the same. Influence can be manufactured, bought, or borrowed. Attention cannot. Attention is immediate, present, and intimate. It requires observation without distraction, which is why it terrifies those accustomed to comfort. They like the idea of being seen, but the reality of scrutiny is heavier than they expected. Attention reshapes perception. When you realize it's watching, you notice patterns in yourself you didn't see before. Repetition, hesitation, compromise, courage, fear, all become more visible. That awareness is a tool. It's also a challenge. Most people resist it because it forces confrontation with parts of themselves they'd rather ignore. Attention also shifts relationships. Some people only like you when you perform, when you distract, when you entertain. Real attention isn't conditional, it's observing what exists, which can be uncomfortable for those who thrived on performing. That discomfort reveals loyalty, authenticity, and alignment more clearly than any words or promises ever could. When attention arrives, excuses lose their power. It doesn't argue with your reasoning or negotiate with your intentions. It simply observes. If you are aligned, it affirms without applause. If you are not, it waits, quietly exposing the discrepancy between who you are and who you claim to be. That exposure is uncomfortable because you cannot hide. Attention also teaches timing. It's not given in rush, in panic, or in desperation. It arrives when you've done the work to be seen without seeking approval. The irony is that people often fail to recognize it while chasing external signs, missing the moment because it doesn't arrive with noise or dramatics. The beauty of attention is that it forces presence. You cannot multitask it, manufacture it, or ignore it. It demands that you exist fully, consciously, deliberately. It watches your alignment, your choices, your honesty. That weight is heavy, but it's also clarifying. It isolates the trivial from the essential, forcing focus on what truly matters. Attention is not a reward. It's a mirror, unflinching, patient, relentless. It reflects alignment, inconsistency, strength, and weakness. It exposes who you are under the weight of observation without mercy, without judgment, and without the need for your justification. That reflection is more valuable than applause, more dangerous than criticism, and more honest than any comfort you've ever known. When you learn to respect attention, you stop chasing it and start listening to it. You notice the subtle signals, the quiet truths, and the unspoken expectations. You begin to move with clarity because you know that what is truly seen is not your image, but your reality focus isn't a feeling, it's a demand, and most people mistake it for convenience. They think focus will come when conditions are perfect, when motivation is high, when the world aligns in neat rows. That's a lie the mind tells to justify delay. Real focus arrives when chaos surrounds you, when temptation beckons, when distraction is louder than discipline. It isn't polite, it doesn't wait for your comfort. Before focus, attention is scattered. You believe you're productive, but you're actually busy. You fill time with tasks that feel important but are meaningless in the grander scheme. Focus destroys that illusion. It asks whether your effort matches your intention, whether your actions honor the result you claim to want, whether you are actually present in the work or just pretending. Focus requires confrontation. It demands that you look at the noise you've been living in and decide which is essential and which is poison. Most people flee this confrontation. They rationalize, justify, postpone. They cling to the illusion that being busy is enough. Focus doesn't settle for that. It waits, patient and relentless, for you to align thought, intention, and action. Discipline and focus are inseparable, but focus is harsher. Discipline allows repetition, habit, routine. Focus asks for precision. It exposes the moments where you've wavered, where you've allowed distraction to masquerade as productivity. The mind resists this because it is uncomfortable to realize how much time has been wasted under the guise of effort. Focus isolates you. It makes you choose. Every choice draws lines. What will you give enter? Jai to. What will you ignore? What will you nurture and what will you destroy? This isolation is uncomfortable because humans are social creatures, prone to validation, dependent on recognition. Focus doesn't provide validation, it provides results. The paradox of focus is that it feels restrictive even while it liberates. By saying no to countless distractions, by narrowing vision, by committing, you gain the freedom to act decisively. Yet the initial sensation is suffocating because the mind resists limitation. It craves the illusion of endless possibility. Focus forces choice, and choice is responsibility. Focus magnifies consequences. Small errors, neglected details, wavering attention, they all become visible under focus. Nothing can hide behind chaos. When you focus, every action is measurable. Every intention is tested. Every moment counts. That exposure is terrifying for people accustomed to camouflage, to excuses, to performing without scrutiny. People often mistake focus for obsession. They believe it's unhealthy, that it consumes. Obsession is impulsive, reactive. Focus is deliberate, disciplined, selective. It doesn't burn you out because it doesn't scatter. It channels. The discomfort of focus is necessary. It's the friction between the comfort you crave and the results you demand from yourself. Focus also transforms perception. You notice patterns previously invisible. You hear subtleties. You observe inconsistencies. You understand priorities because distractions fade into the background. That clarity is uncomfortable because it confronts you with truths you've avoided. It reveals where courage is absent, where energy is misapplied, where intention does not match behavior. Focus demands patience. Results are rarely immediate. The mind rebels against waiting. It wants validation, recognition, reward. Focus ignores these impulses. It requires sustained enga. Ji meant repeated alignment of thought and action, a refusal to let distraction dilute effort. That resistance feels like suffering, but it is refinement. Focus creates boundaries, not just externally, but internally. It teaches the mind to reject frivolous thoughts, unproductive conversations, and emotional detours. Every boundary feels like loss at first, because the human brain resists limitation. But these boundaries are essential scaffolding, the framework that allows meaningful creation within the chaos of life. Most people fail at focus because they underestimate its invisibility. They want visible productivity, external acknowledgement, applause. Focus doesn't operate in spectacle. It works quietly, consistently, invisibly, until momentum builds. The work is often solitary, tedious, repetitive, yet profoundly transformative. Focus reshapes time. Hours stretch or compress depending on how disciplined you are in alignment. Distraction consumes minutes unnoticed. Attention dissipates hours into nothing. Focus converts moments into leverage. It doesn't create more time. It makes the time you have exponentially more potent. Focus tests character. It reveals laziness, fear, impatience, and inconsistency. It exposes whether effort is genuine or performative. It doesn't forgive pretense. It demands integrity of action. That is why it feels harsh. The harshness isn't punishment, it is calibration, forcing alignment between who you are, what you intend, and what you produce. Focus doesn't ask permission. It arrives in the middle of chaos and expects you to comply. It doesn't wait for readiness. It doesn't soften for emotion or circumstance. Either you follow it or you watch it pass and someone else occupies the space you wished was yours. Mastering focus is mastering presence. It is the courage to stand in the work that matters, ignore everything else, and let the world F. Audit until only what you control and what you create exists. That discipline feels unnatural, uncomfortable, even cruel at first, but it's the only path to results that matter. Discipline isn't a virtue people like to talk about because it doesn't flatter, it doesn't entertain, it doesn't give immediate pleasure. Discipline is quiet, relentless, and invisible until results arrive, and by then most people mistake it for talent or luck. The truth is, discipline is the engine. It's the daily grind, the invisible consistency, the choice to do what others avoid because the work is unglamorous, inconvenient, or exhausting. Most people confuse discipline with motivation. Motivation is exciting, flashy, temporary. It's a spark that feels good but dies quickly. Discipline doesn't wait for excitement. It thrives in monotony. It thrives when the mind resists, when the body protests, when emotions beg for indulgence. Discipline asks whether you are willing to act even when feeling weak, uncertain, or unrecognized. Discipline is uncomfortable because it's honest. It reveals what you value more, temporary pleasure or long-term results. Most people avoid this question by distracting themselves, procrastinating, or rationalizing why they'll act tomorrow. Discipline doesn't negotiate. It confronts you with the cost of inaction every single day, whether you notice or not. The paradox of discipline is that it feels restrictive while it liberates. Choosing the hard path consistently narrows options in the short term, but expands freedom in the long term. Every sacrifice, every repetitive effort, every moment you resist indulgence is an investment. That discomfort is the currency of results, the invisible work that builds outcomes others call genius. Discipline isolates you from the crowd. Most people want shortcuts, applause, validation. They want the appearance of success without the labor. That creates it. Discipline forces you to move differently, act deliberately, and endure boredom when others chase excitement. That solitude feels heavy, like walking in a space where nobody else understands the rules. People underestimate the cost of indiscipline because failure is gradual. It creeps in through tiny compromises, repeated avoidance, unkept promises to oneself. You may think one skipped habit or one ignored task is inconsequential. Discipline shows that it isn't. Every small neglect compounds, reshapes outcomes, and eventually surfaces as results you didn't want. Discipline isn't glamorous, but it is powerful. It operates in silence, unseen, uncelebrated, the repetition of small actions, showing up when it's easier to stay in bed, speaking the truth when lies feel safer, practicing when no one watches, creates leverage invisible to those chasing shortcuts. That leverage eventually becomes unstoppable force. Discipline also exposes weakness. Under the weight of daily choices, you notice where fear dominates, where laziness sneaks in, where excuses thrive. That exposure is painful because it confronts ego and habit. Most people flee this confrontation, but discipline asks for confrontation, not avoidance. It's relentless because growth is relentless. Discipline transforms perception. The same actions that feel tedious become milestones in hindsight. Waking up early, writing when tired, training when unmotivated. These are invisible victories. They accumulate silently, and eventually the results that others admire are nothing more than the natural consequence of consistent discomfort endured with clarity. Discipline demands patience. It's not the flash of energy, the burst of inspiration, or the applause of others. It's consistent action repeated daily, often without recognition. The discomfort of waiting for results is where most people abandon it. Disciple. Ian teaches endurance, the ability to persist when reward is invisible, when doubt screams louder than progress. Discipline redefines control. You can't control outcomes entirely, but you can control your effort, your decisions, your responses. That control is subtle but profound. It builds confidence not from luck or opinion, but from the repeated knowledge that you do what is required regardless of circumstance or desire. Discipline isn't perfection, it's persistence. It's acting even when imperfect. It's resisting the temptation to stop because conditions aren't ideal. It's knowing that mastery, growth, and impact are forged in the grind, not the spark. The comfort of waiting for inspiration or ease is a trap that discipline refuses to honor. The hardest part is internal alignment. Discipline demands honesty. It forces you to confront where you've been lying to yourself, where compromise undermines intention, where fear masks as strategy. That confrontation is uncomfortable because humans naturally resist self-exposure. Discipline doesn't negotiate. It reveals quietly, steadily, until avoidance is impossible. Discipline also defines boundaries. It clarifies what deserves energy and what doesn't. It trains the mind to reject distraction, the body to resist indulgence, the emotions to defer gratification. Those boundaries feel confining at first because humans resist restriction, but they are the architecture of power. Most people fail not because they lack ability, but because they lack discipline. Ability without consistency, without structure, without sacrifice is chaos disguised as potential. Discipline transforms potential into results, theory into practice, fleeting desire into tangible outcomes. Discipline is invisible until consequences arrive. It is unsexy until impact shows. It is uncomfortable because it exposes weakness, forces honesty, and demands susti. Ned effort. Yet that very discomfort is what shapes you, what prepares you, what ensures that when results arrive, they are undeniable and deserved sacrifice is misunderstood because people imagine it as dramatic, painful, or visible. They think of giving up comfort as an event, a singular moment of loss that must be celebrated or mourned. The truth is, sacrifice is invisible, cumulative, and quiet. It's in the tiny choices no one notices, the repeated acts of restraint, the disciplined refusal of immediate gratification for something that might not even have a guaranteed reward. That's why it feels heavy and why most people avoid it. People fear sacrifice because it exposes priorities. Every act of giving up forces you to confront what matters more to you: comfort, convenience, approval, or long-term gain. It strips away the illusions we tell ourselves to feel safe, productive, or accomplished. Sacrifice is honest. It doesn't flatter. It doesn't wait for recognition. It asks whether you are willing to endure discomfort for something that isn't guaranteed, and the answer is revealed in action, not thought. Sacrifice is not heroic in the way people imagine. It's not about dramatic gestures or public martyrdom. The real work happens quietly. It's waking up before the world, working when others rest, speaking truths that are uncomfortable, making choices that isolate you, all without applause. That quiet accumulation of small acts creates leverage, and leverage is invisible until it can't be ignored. Most people fail to recognize sacrifice because it doesn't reward immediately. Our culture teaches instant gratification, constant feedback, and validation through attention. Sacrifice teaches patience, endurance, and delayed satisfaction. It forces you to measure success not by applause, but by alignment with purpose and the integrity of your choices. That delay feels uncomfo. Our table, because humans want immediate proof. But sacrifice operates on a timeline that the unprepared resist. Sacrifice also exposes fear. Every decision to give up, to resist, to endure confronts the part of you that wants comfort, safety, and convenience. Fear whispers that the risk isn't worth it, that the discomfort will never pay off, that you're foolish to endure for something intangible. Sacrifice doesn't argue, it simply exists as the measure of what you are willing to pay for results that matter. That tension between fear and action is where growth hides. Sacrifice is isolating. It creates distance between those willing to endure and those unwilling to give up comfort. People will call you obsessive, cold, extreme, or reckless because they can't see the invisible work or the long-term vision behind the choices. That isolation feels heavy because humans crave connection, approval, and empathy, but sacrifice demands that you sometimes walk alone, carrying the weight of choice without audience or applause. The paradox of sacrifice is that it's uncomfortable yet liberating. Giving up comfort or convenience feels like loss, but it frees energy, attention, and focus for what truly matters. It narrows the field, eliminates distractions, and magnifies the value of persistence. The friction, the tension, the daily resistance, all of it compounds into a force that propels results, but only if endured consciously. Sacrifice sharpens perception. It reveals what is truly essential. When you give up what is unnecessary, the critical elements of life, work, and growth become clearer. You begin to notice who and what matters, what effort produces real impact, and what is a distraction disguised as necessity. That awareness is uncomfortable because it forces evaluation and choice in areas where avoidance was previously possible. People resist sacrifice because it exposes the cumulative cost of small decisions ignored. Every skipped practice, every avoided responsibility, every indulgence once excused becomes visible in the scale of results that follow. Sacrifice magnifies the consequences of neglect and rewards the consistency of intentional effort. That exposure is uncomfortable because it leaves no room for excuses. Sacrifice demands foresight. It asks whether you can act in the present for a future that is uncertain. Humans naturally crave certainty. Sacrifice thrives in ambiguity, in the tension between immediate discomfort and deferred reward. That tension is heavy because it requires trust, not in others, but in yourself, and self-trust is a muscle most people neglect. Sacrifice also teaches alignment. It forces you to evaluate your values, priorities, and integrity. Every choice to endure, resist, and delay satisfaction is a statement about who you are becoming. The discomfort lies in being honest with yourself, acknowledging what you are willing to pay for results that matter, and facing what you've tolerated in the past. Sacrifice is cumulative. It isn't one act, it is repeated decisions, daily practice, the quiet endurance of what most people avoid. Each small act compounds, and over time, the invisible work creates outcomes that appear effortless to outsiders. That is why the truth of sacrifice is rarely recognized until it manifests as results, and even then it is often mistaken for luck, talent, or timing. People fail at sacrifice because it demands consistency without immediate validation. It asks for persistence when the reward is uncertain and the discomfort is present. It isolates, it exposes, it challenges ego and fear simultaneously. Yet, that is exactly why it is powerful, because the invisible weight endured today shapes the extraordinary results of tomorrow. Sacrifice is not glamorous, but it is unstoppable. It works quietly, in repetition, in restraint, in discipline. It exposes weakness, builds character, and aligns action with purpose. The discomfort it brings is the measure of its value, and the endurance it requires separates those who merely hope from those who achieve. You ever notice how people love the idea of trust until they actually have to do it? Oh, they'll talk about it all day, trust the process, have faith, believe it'll all work out. Nice little words, easy to say when everything's going their way. But the second life flips the script, the second things get messy, unpredictable, unfair, oh, that's when the real fun begins. Suddenly all that trust, out the window. Now it's, why is this happening? Where's the fairness? Where's the justice? Like they expected life to follow some kind of contract, like they thought they were owed smooth sailing just because they played by the rules. People love to talk about trust. Oh, they wear it like a badge, like it's this shiny little virtue they've mastered. I trust, I believe, I have faith. But you know what's funny? You take all those big, beautiful words and throw them into a storm, and suddenly, everybody forgets how to use them. Because trust is easy when everything's going your way. When the sun's shining, the road's clear, and life is handing you everything just the way you like it. But take one thing away, one little thing, and watch how fast they start questioning everything. See? People think they trust, but they don't. Not really. What they actually do is agree with the plan. When they like it, they say, I trust that everything will work out. But what they mean is, I trust that everything will work out the way I want it to. And the second it doesn't, the second life veers off their perfect little script, that's when the masks come off. That's when you see what's really underneath. And most of the time, it's fear, doubt. Because the truth is, people don't trust what they can't control. And control, oh, now that's the real addiction. They like to think they're in charge, like they've got a say in how things go. They make their plans, their schedules, they draw their little maps and think life's just gonna follow along. But life doesn't follow anyone. It doesn't care about their plan. It doesn't care about their expectations. It does what it wants, when it wants. And if that means pulling the rug out from under them, oh, it will. And the second that happens, the second their world turns upside down, their so-called trust, gone. Now they start demanding answers. Why is this happening? Where's the justice? I did everything right. Oh, they turn into little lawyers, building their case against the universe. Because in their heads, there's some kind of invisible contract. If I do good, I get good. If I follow the rules, nothing bad happens to me. But oh, what a joke that is. Because the moment they realize life doesn't work like that fairness is just a bedtime story they were told to help them sleep at night, that's when the real panic sets in. They scramble. They try to make sense of it. There has to be a reason. There has to be an explanation. Because the idea that there isn't one, that things just happen without warning, without fairness, without a neat little reason tied up with a bow, oh, they can't handle that. So they try to bargain. All right, fine. I'll trust. But only if I get some kind of sign, something to show me it's all gonna be okay. Because deep down, they still think trust is a trade, a deal. I believe, and in return I get what I want. But that's not how trust works. No, no, no. Trust isn't about liking the plan. It's about believing in the plan, even when you hate it. Even when it doesn't make sense. Even when everything is falling apart and you have every reason to let go. That's where real trust starts. Not in the sunshine, not in the easy days, but in the wreckage, in the dark, in the moments when you have no idea where this is going, but you still choose to hold on. But most people won't do that. They'll keep fighting, keep questioning, keep demanding reasons. And maybe, just maybe, when they're exhausted enough, when they've run out of arguments, when they finally realize they never had control to begin with, they'll stop. Not because they got an answer, but because they finally understand they don't need one. Good people, like, decided fairness was some kind of law, some unshakable code. Good things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people. That's the deal, right? That's the way it's supposed to be. But tell me something. Who wrote that rule? Who wrote that rule? Who the universe follow, wrong, full, sad, unhappy? Because if that were true, if life really cared about fairness, explain to me why the wicked prosper and the righteous suffer. Explain why the ones who lie, cheat, and steal always seem to climb higher while the honest ones get buried. Explain how people who do everything right still end up with nothing. See, fairness, that's a human invention. A bedtime story people tell themselves to make the chaos feel a little less chaotic. Because the truth is hard. It's brutal. It's something most people don't want to admit. Life isn't fair, and it never was. But oh, they'll fight that idea with everything they've got. They'll try to make sense of it, to bend the world into some kind of moral balance where everything works out the way it should. And when it doesn't, when the innocent suffer and the guilty walk free, oh, that's when the cracks start to show. That's when people start losing their minds. Because if fairness isn't real, if there's no guarantee that good leads to good and bad leads to bad, then what are they supposed to do? And that's where they start pointing fingers. That's where they start demanding answers. Why did this happen? Who's responsible? Where's the justice? They want someone to blame, someone to explain it all, someone to fix it. But nobody's coming. No one's going to swoop in and make sense of it all. And that thought, that is what breaks them. Because now they're left with a question they never wanted to ask. If life isn't fair, what's the point? Oh, that's a dangerous question. Because once someone starts asking that, once they really let that sink in, they only have two options. The first one's easy. Give up. Stop trying. Stop believing. If life's just going to take what it wants, if doing the right thing doesn't guarantee a happy ending, then why bother? Just let go. That's what most people do. They grow cold, bitter, empty. They stop caring because caring never seemed to get them anywhere. And just like that, they become exactly like the people they once despised. But the second option? Now, that one's a little trickier. It takes something most people don't have. It takes trust, not trust in fairness, because fairness is a lie. No, trust in something bigger than fairness. Something that doesn't play by human rules, doesn't owe explanations, doesn't follow some neat little equation where kindness always leads to rewards and cruelty always leads to punishment. Because if fairness was real, if it worked the way people think it should, then trust wouldn't even be necessary. They wouldn't need it. But trust, real trust, oh, it only exists because life doesn't play fair. And here's the real kicker. Trust isn't about waiting for proof. It's not about sitting around, arms crossed, saying, "I'll believe once I see how this all turns out." That's not trust. That's just a transaction. Trust is stepping forward when there's no proof, when nothing makes sense, when everything in you is screaming that this isn't how it was supposed to go, and yet you walk forward anyway, not because you understand the plan, but because you accept that there is one. But most people aren't wired like that. They'll spend their whole lives trying to make things fair, trying to twist and bend and force the world into some kind of system where everything adds up, but it never will, because fairness, that's just something people made up to make themselves feel safe. The real world, it's much messier than that. And those who can't handle that truth, well, they'll just keep fighting a battle they were never meant to win. People think trust is some kind of business deal, a trade, a neat little exchange where they hand over their faith, and in return they get safety, certainty, a guaranteed happy ending. I trust, therefore I receive. That's the arrangement, right? That's what they've been told. And as long as things go their way, they'll play along. They'll nod, they'll smile, they'll say all the right things. Everything happens for a reason. It'll all work out, just have faith. But the second the deal doesn't pay off, the second they give their trust and life doesn't reward them, that's when you see what they really believe. 'Cause let's be honest, most people don't actually trust. Not really. What they do is gamble. They place their bets, follow the so-called rules, and expect a certain outcome. They think if they do the right things, say the right words, check all the right boxes, then life owes them a good job, a happy family, a pain-free existence. And when they don't get it, when things fall apart anyway, now they're angry, now they feel cheated, because in their heads, they earned something better. They deserve something better. But that's the joke, isn't it? Because trust was never supposed to be a transaction. Trust means handing over control without conditions. It means saying, I believe even if I never see the proof. I believe even if nothing goes the way I want. And most people, they can't do that. They say they trust, but what they actually mean is, I trust as long as I get my way. They'll go along with the plan, sure, but only if it makes sense. Only if it's fair. Only if it makes sense. Only if it's fair. Only if it makes sense. Only if it's fair. Only if it makes sense. But the moment things go south, the moment they start losing, they tear up the contract. Because they never really trusted to begin with. That's the thing about people. They crave control more than they crave faith. They need to feel like they're steering the ship, like they have a say in how the story ends. That's why they bargain, why they beg, why they demand explanations when things don't go their way. Tell me why this happened, show me the reason, prove to me that this pain wasn't pointless. Because deep down, they still think they deserve answers. They think trust should come with a safety net, a backup plan, an escape route. But real trust is when you let go without one. And here's the funny part. People say they want to trust, but what they really want is certainty, proof, guarantees. They want to know for sure that everything will work out before they take the leap. But trust doesn't work like that. Trust is jumping before you know where you'll land. It's choosing to believe without evidence. And that terrifies people. Because they don't want to risk looking foolish. They don't want to believe in something only to end up hurt, lost, disappointed. But that's exactly why trust matters. Because if they only believed when it was easy, when they had all the answers, then it wouldn't be trust at all. It would just be logic. Most people will never understand this. They'll keep playing the game, thinking they can trade their faith for a pain-free life. But when the world knocks them down, when their plans fall apart, they'll realize that life never promised them a fair deal. And that's when they have a choice. They can walk away bitter, broken, convinced that trust was a lie, or they can do something harder, something that takes more strength than anything else. They can trust anyway, without guarantees, without conditions, without proof. Not because they know how things will turn out, but because they've finally accepted that they don't have to. People like to think they're in control. Oh, they cling to that idea like it's the only thing keeping them from spinning off into the abyss. I make the choices. I call the shots. I decide how my life goes. That's what they tell themselves, day in and day out, as if saying it enough times makes it true, but deep down, deep down, they know. They know how fragile that illusion really is. Because all it takes is one moment, one accident, one wrong turn, one little thing they never saw coming, and suddenly everything they thought they control is gone. And that's when the panic sets in. That's when they start clawing at the walls, desperate to get back in charge. But control? Control is the biggest joke of all. It's never been real, never been something they actually had. They just believe they did. And belief, that's a dangerous thing. Because when it shatters, when reality comes knocking, most people don't know what to do. Some fight it. They scramble, they struggle, they refuse to let go. They think if they just try harder, if they just push a little more, they can wrestle life back into their hands. Others, they break. They give up. If they can't have control, they don't want anything at all. And then there are the rare ones, the smart ones, the ones who finally figure it out, the ones who stop fighting, stop resisting, and do the one thing that actually makes sense. See, real trust, it only starts when control ends. When a person finally understands that they were never in charge to begin with, and most people, they don't like that. They hate it. Because trusting means letting go, means walking forward with no guarantees, means accepting that things will happen outside their control, and that they don't get to change that. And that burns them up inside. Because humans, they need reasons. They need to know why things happen, need to know that there's some grand design behind it all, need to feel like their pain, their struggles, their losses mean something. And when they don't get those answers, when life just shrugs and walks away, that's when they start questioning everything. They ask, how could this happen? Where's the justice? Why wasn't I protected? And the truth is, they're not really looking for answers. No. What they're looking for is control. Because if they can just understand the chaos, maybe, just maybe, they can stop it from happening again. But that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Trust isn't about getting explanations. It isn't about being handed a neat little map with a big red X marking the path ahead. No, trust is about stepping forward without knowing what's coming next, without needing to. But most people, they'll never do that. They'll keep grasping for control, keep convincing themselves that they just need a little more time, a little more effort, a little more certainty, and then they'll be okay. They'll trust after they understand, after they get proof, after they see how it all works out. But that's not trust. That's just waiting. And waiting, that's just another word for fear. Because what they're really afraid of isn't losing control. No. What they're really afraid of is admitting they never had it to begin with. People have this funny little habit. When things go their way, when life's smooth and easy, oh, they're all smiles. They walk around with their heads held high, patting themselves on the back. Look at me. Look at what I did. Look how well I planned everything. They talk about their hard work, their smart choices, their discipline, like they're the masterminds behind it all. Like they built their own little world and now they're the kings of it. But the moment things go sideways, the moment their perfect little plans come crashing down, oh, now it's a different story. Now suddenly it's, why is this happening to me? What did I do to deserve this? See, when life is good, people take the credit. But when life is bad, now they want someone else to blame. They shake their fists at the sky, demanding answers. Why me? Why now? Like they were supposed to be untouchable, like the universe made some kind of mistake. Because deep down, they still think the world works like a vending machine. Put in the right coins, press the right buttons, and ding, out comes the perfect life. They want to believe they can earn their way out of pain, deserve their way into happiness. But life doesn't work like that. It never did. And the real kicker, when things really fall apart, when they lose the job, the money, the people they love, now they don't just demand answers. Now they want to walk away. Now they want to throw their hands up and say, well, if this is how it's going to be, what's the point? Because what they had wasn't trust. No, what they had was a deal, a contract in their minds. I'll trust as long as things go my way. But when that deal breaks, when life doesn't play fair, they don't just lose their comfort, they lose their faith entirely. That's the difference between real trust and a business arrangement. Real trust? It sticks around even when the deal falls through, even when the whole world is upside down, even when nothing makes sense, because trust isn't about control. It isn't about getting what you want. It's about holding on when you have every reason to let go. It's about looking at the wreckage, at all the things you thought you couldn't live without and saying, I don't need to understand this to move forward. But most people, they'll never get there. They'll spend their whole lives chasing fairness, chasing control, trying to make sense of things that were never supposed to make sense. They'll think if they just try hard enough, if they just do everything right, then bad things won't happen to them. But when they do, when life takes what it wants, no matter how much they planned, no matter how much they prayed, they'll break. Because they never trusted in the first place. They just hoped for an easy ride. And hope? That's not the same thing as trust. Hope disappears when things get bad. But trust, real trust, is what you hold on to when everything else is gone. People love to talk about faith like it's this warm, cozy thing, like it's a safety blanket they can wrap around themselves whenever life gets a little chilly. Just believe, they say. Everything will be fine, but that's not faith. No, that's just another lie people tell themselves to stay comfortable. Real faith? Oh, real faith isn't pretty. It isn't neat. It isn't easy. Real faith is messy. It's brutal. It's stepping off a ledge and not knowing if there's ground beneath you. It's standing in the middle of a storm with no umbrella, no shelter, and no promise that the rain's ever gonna stop. And most people, they don't want that. They want the illusion of faith, the feeling of it, but not the reality. See, people say they trust, but what they really mean is they trust as long as they get answers, as long as things make sense, as long as they can connect the dots and see the bigger picture. But when life takes away the map, when there's no explanation, no reason, no way to understand why things happen the way they did, that's when they start looking for the exit. That's when they start saying, maybe I was wrong. Maybe this isn't worth it. Because they never really trusted in the first place. They just wanted to feel like they did. That's the thing about people. They don't actually want faith. What they want is control. What they want is a guarantee. They want to know that if they put in their time, if they say the right words, if they follow all the rules, then life will reward them. They think it's a formula, a system, like a game where if they just play it right, they win. But real trust, real faith, it doesn't work like that. It's not a contract. It's not a deal. It's not something you can earn. It's something you have without proof, without guarantees, without needing to see how the story ends. But that's hard. That's so hard. Because people, they hate uncertainty. They'd rather have a bad answer than no answer at all. That's why they go looking for signs, for reasons, for meaning in things that don't make sense. That's why they tell themselves, everything happens for a reason, because it makes them feel like they still have control, like there's some kind of order to the chaos. But what if there isn't? What if life isn't a puzzle to be solved, but just something you survive? Could they still have faith then? Could they still believe when there's nothing to hold on to? Most people can't. Most people won't. They'll crumble the second things stop making sense. They'll walk away when the road gets dark, because they never really wanted trust. They wanted certainty. They wanted to know that everything would work out in the end. But the ones who really get it, the ones who understand what faith actually means, they don't need to know. They don't need to see the whole picture. They don't need life to be fair, to be easy, to be something they can predict. They just keep going. They just hold on. Not because they're sure of what's coming next, but because they've finally accepted that they don't have to be.